Welcome back, Gadgeteers. So today I would like to talk about Fedora 33. As you know, I'm pretty much a default Fedora user and have been for many years. Although I will be doing some experimentations with some other distros and actually FreeBSD, which is a Unix-like operating system that's similar to Linux. However, let's talk about Fedora 33 beta. Just came out at the end of September, and the Fedora project is hoping to have the official version of Fedora 33 released by October 20th with a fallback date of October 27th. Does that mean that it will be released on time? Well, not necessarily. If you look at previous Fedora releases, sometimes it takes a little while, and I don't mind that because I'd rather have a product that's ready for prime time than have something that's half-baked and causes more problems than it does help when you go to the newer version. So let's talk about some of these differences that we're going to see and what they're going to do for us. Now, many of these are under the hood, so unfortunately you're not going to necessarily see any difference, but you should experience better throughput, better performance, and all in all, just a system that runs better. So let's get right into it. Okay, so the first and probably most important feature is, after all these years since Fedora Core 1 using the ext file system, they're going to change over to the BTRFS file system. Probably one of the most interesting features of BTRFS is the ability to create a snapshot of your environment and save it just in case you install some new package or an application and something goes seriously awry. You can roll back and go to your previous snapshot. Now, this is something that most people who are using Mac OS and Windows are familiar with, and finally this is something we're going to see on Fedora. Now, do other distributions do this? I really can't answer that question. I'm going to go with probably some, but for Fedora this is definitely a new thing, and for 32 previous releases of Fedora we use the old ext file system, so we salute you. This one, it may be a little controversial to some of you, but Fedora will begin using the Nano editor as default. Really doesn't make any difference to me. I like VI or Vim, VI improved depending on what you want to call it. And I always call files with Vim, so I type in VI space file name. Now, I don't know if the VI package is installed or not. We're going to find out when we actually do a build here of Fedora 33 and find out what happens. But for those who really don't feel comfortable with VI or Emacs, they're going to be able to use the Nano editor, which probably, if I was to think about it, is an editor that is definitely going to encompass a larger group of people. So those that don't really feel comfortable with editing in the text mode might find this a little less daunting than VI or Emacs. So we talked about BTRFS. One of the things that's going to happen to swap, for those of you who don't know what swap is, what it is a partition on your hard drive or your solid state drive that is used for temporary storage of files in the event that you use up all your physical RAM. So you run out of RAM, you have no more memory, and another program comes in and it wants to use some of that RAM. We have to do something, so we swap out some of the active pages in RAM to the swap partition, and when we do that we can give a little more RAM to the program that's coming in and continue running all the programs that you want. The downside with swap, of course, is it's based on a hard disk or an SSD. Although an SSD is faster, there still is quite a delay if you go to call that program again, and by call I mean open it up and start doing work in it again. And it may take some time for it to respond because it has to pull that information out of swap and put it back into memory. And of course, before it can do that, it has to find something else to put into swap to make room for the program to come back. So this ZRAM concept, basically what it's going to do is it's going to use a RAM drive. Now, many of you may not have heard of this, but this is something that's been around since the DOS days. And basically what it'll do is it'll take RAM and it'll create what looks like a hard drive or a swap partition on a hard drive on an actual device. But it's not. It's actually a chunk of RAM. And that ZRAM partition or swap essentially will compress data that's coming into that RAM drive. So hopefully what it'll do, although there is a performance penalty, the data will come out of your regular RAM and the new program will go in and use that RAM. I know it sounds confusing. And then the program that we swapped out will go into ZRAM, which is that compressed RAM drive. Remember, like we just said, there is a penalty for information, data going into the ZRAM drive and coming back out. But my bet is it's actually much faster than swap itself, which uses a physical partition on one of the drives. The next feature that we're going to talk about is one called systemd-resolved. Many of you may know that under the hood, this service manager called systemd took over. This was a while ago, many releases back. I think it was like Fedora. I think Fedora 15 was the last one to use sysv or System 5, and the service manager became systemd, which was controversial and still is to this day. Well, to add to that, now we're going to have a service called systemd-resolved, and what that will do is resolve domain names into IP addresses for you, the client. And one of the great benefits about this is increased protection, privacy, and security for you. It's not necessarily something new. Other services, DNS services, have been doing this for some time, but one of the cool things about resolved is that it will actually use TLS to encrypt your request to the DNS server. The DNS server will respond and use TLS to send it back. It's like a tunnel that nobody else can look into and see what you're requesting. Is that important? Well, yes, because originally DNS was completely open, meaning when you sent your request, anybody along that path could intercept your packet and say, let's see what they're asking for, what kind of websites they're visiting. Now, you may still be using your DNS services from your IP address, your ISP, but there are ways to use other DNS resolvers if you don't want your internet service provider to know what you're looking for. Because even though we have TLS and we've encrypted from you, the client, to the server still knows what you're asking for. So we can take that out of the picture. One way is to use Google DNS services. So the 8.8.8.8.8 is the IP address for Google DNS services. Now, like I say, for many of you, this just isn't important, and just know that resolved is going to give you enhanced security, privacy, and protection so that many less people would know what you're doing and where you're going. Okay, now we're getting to some eye candy. There will be a new version of GNOME 3.38. I want to say ooh ah, but every time I install the latest version, it basically looks the same. I understand that there's supposed to be some animated background. So we're taking one for Mac OS. You'll have an image that as the night goes by, it'll get darker and look beautiful, and you can say ooh and ah. But I guess why not? I just wish that GNOME and Linux in general would stop trying so hard to be a follower of Apple and Mac OS and Windows. It personally annoys me. Now, some of you may disagree with that and say, no, that's not what it is at all. But think about it. Think about GNOME and Mac OS, how close they are. Which one came first? Anyway, I digress. This is not one that is actually going to happen here with Fedora 33, but a topic has been opened on Fedora Project about dropping legacy BIOS support and only supporting UEFI-based systems. I would like to say that's a really bad idea, but if you think about it, it is a lot of work to support the older BIOS types and the newer UEFI BIOSes. And most systems that are worth installing a newer operating system on really already have UEFI. It's been around for quite a while. I remember when I had my, what did I have? Yoga Book 2, I think it was, and that was 7 or 8 years ago, and it had a UEFI BIOS. So it's not like you're gonna cut off a whole range of systems from being able to necessarily use Fedora whatever 34 or 35 down the road, but the times are changing, and so is the software, and so is the hardware, and I don't see a logical reason to send all of these resources to developing the BIOS. Don't mind my dog in the background. To develop support for regular BIOS when they could be used someplace else, something that we need. Next on the list, if you have an Intel CPU, there's a new service called ThermalD that essentially will help you with Intel-based CPUs. It's a more advanced service for thermal management and power usage for your particular Intel processor. So we'll see what happens. Now, the only Intel processor I have is on a laptop, and I use a service called TLP, but that's more of a battery saving service than it is power management, although in some ways they kind of overlap a little bit. But will I install it by default? Probably. Why not? I like to try different things. Early OOM is a service that essentially makes your system less sluggish, especially when you're using most of your RAM. So there is definitely a benefit to it. It was actually introduced in Fedora 32, but it was only for the GNOME version, not the KDE spin. So here in Fedora 33, that is being added to the KDE spin, which is interesting because many times whenever I see different features being added to, say, Fedora or any other distribution, you got to remember that it doesn't necessarily mean it's added to some of the spins. So Fedora 33 XFCE might not have early OOM yet, so keep that in mind. All right, just a quick wrap up. One of the things I want to mention, BTRFS, we talked about that in the beginning. Fedora's strategy for this Fedora project is to set it up, but only the default settings. So that means we may not see a bunch of services or functions like Snapshot that we were expecting. And the reason is they want to switch over to the file system first because that's a really, really big step. And then each iteration of Fedora that comes out, they will begin adding different features and functionality to BTRFS. All right, let's go ahead and do an installation of Fedora 33, and we're going to see what it looks like. And I'm really curious to see if VI is installed by default, even though it's not the default editor. All right, let's get Oracle Virtual Machine VirtualBox running. Let us create a new virtual machine. We will call this Fedora 33 beta. And next. I don't want to do 1 gigabyte. I have 32 in here, so let's at least give this thing some memory. We'll give it 4 gigabytes. And we're going to create a virtual hard disk. And it's going to be a VDI. Hopefully, we won't have any problem with the BTRFS file system in conjunction with the virtual machine. Yes, we want to do dynamically allocated, which basically means that the size of the virtual drive will expand as needed, although it appears to have whatever we're about to give it. And I think I'm going to give it 80 gigabytes, which is very optimistic. If it did get up to 80, it would probably fill up my home partition, so it's not like that's going to happen. We hope anyway. So we've created it down here, Fedora 33. I believe when I power it on, it should ask me for a bootable ISO media. If it doesn't, well, we'll figure it out. So let's click Start. And it's asking me for Yarrow Disk 1, which is actually Fedora Core 1. So that's definitely old news. All right, there's Fedora Workstation 33 Beta. And we will choose that particular ISO. And we'll click Start. My fan is definitely blowing hard on the laptop here. Says that it started GNOME Display Manager. All right. Let's cut to the chase. Let's install it to the hard drive. Hopefully you're familiar with this. With all the installs that we've done, the installer changes very little, which is a good thing, but can also be a bad thing. All right, we're going to do English. And we're notified here that it's unstable pre-release software. So it's a beta, meaning it isn't finished yet. There's still work to be done. I'm going to say I want to proceed anyway. Automatic partitioning selected, but we haven't selected a drive yet. Better. And begin installation. I don't know if you saw it. It does still create an ext4 partition. And then right after that, it created a BTRFS partition on dev SDA2. So there are still some ext4 partitions here. It's probably boot or swap or something like that. All right. I'm going to pause while it does the installation unless something really weird happens, and I will come back right after. All right, our installation is complete. You may notice that all the text is really small now, and the reason for that is because this particular virtual machine actually installs the tools during the installation of the OS, and I changed the view. Right now we are doing scale to 100%, I believe. So let's go ahead and finish installation, reboot it, and let's see what it looks like. Okay, we don't need it to boot up to the Fedora ISO that we have, so we're going to force an unmount, and then we'll go ahead and restart the machine. We'll do a reset, and we should boot to the local drive. At least I hope we do anyway. There we go. You can hear my fan running in the background. You know what? I think we only gave this thing one CPU. Of course it's going to be slower. Ugh. Anyway, so this is one of the features of the new GNOME. It's supposed to give you a nice little guide that'll help you through setup and use. And if you're not used to Linux, this is not a bad idea. So we're going to go through it. Start setup. I personally turn off location services, but I do leave automatic problem reporting because we want GNOME and Linux in general to get better. And the way we do that is by providing automatic reporting. I do not have any online accounts that I want to link to GNOME. All right, we're going to create a user account. Looks good to me. All right, we're all done and we can start using Fedora. So if I go to view and do full screen, I get a better full screen image. So let's look at this tour that they have. This is the new part here. It tells us about activities to launch apps up here in the corner. Type to search. All I got to do is start typing, and that I like, of course. Here's the time to see notifications. No notifications. If I had linked my Google account, which has my calendar in it, here, then I would get to see those notifications. And that's one good reason for using GNOME over KDE, which is what I normally use. System information and settings. So we have network settings. We have audio. Well, actually, we had a whole bunch of stuff, don't we? Let me go back here. So these icons basically do the same thing. They just show you each of the different settings. So it doesn't matter which one we click on. Basically, like GNOME probably normally is on previous versions, but I don't use it very much, so I'm not quite used to that. Yeah, same thing. And of course, same thing. Kind of a waste of buttons. Use software to find and install apps. Gotcha. So if you're wondering about that, let's click activities and see if they have it here by default. They do. Software. And there's the tour. We're actually running it right now, so you have the default applications that show up on the sidebar here, and then you have applications that you're running also show up. All right, we're going to go for next. That's it. We hope you enjoy Fedora. Well, okay. What I'd like to know is if I can change the font size, because it's kind of hard for you guys to see what I'm doing, and if not, I usually install the tweak tool. Let's see what we've got. I'm not going to use 200%. That's just simply too large. There would have to be something in between there. Maybe accessibility? I don't see anything. So I'll tell you what. Normally what I do, it says just type. Yeah, if you click activities, then you can just type. We'll go to software. Let's go shopping. Yes, I want third-party repositories, so I'm going to enable those. And then I'm going to cruise over here and do a search for tweak. And I'll find the GNOME Tweaks tool. I really feel like it should just be included by default. I clicked install, but I don't see anything yet. Oh, there we go. I really should have shut down this virtual machine and gave it more than one lousy processor. So it's kind of limping along here for us. All right, we'll do launch. We'll go to fonts. We could have done zoom inside the virtual machine, but I don't like how the aliasing of the fonts look. They look really bad, basically. So if I did a 125% zoom, for example, it just doesn't look that good to me. All right, I don't know if that helps you guys. Let me go a little bit bigger. All right. Let's close tweaks. And of course, you know what I want. No. Terminal. Shift Control plus plus. No. Control plus plus. No. It is not mapping through. So let's see. All we did there was start a bunch of them. All right. Okay, so the first thing we want to have a look at is see if the BTRFS partition is installed, which we pretty much know it is, but we're going to have a look anyway. We'll do a sudo fdisk-l. Fdisk is showing us that there are two partitions created. One is SDA1, which is the boot partition with a size of 1 GB, and SDA2, which is our home partition, which is 79 GB, but it's not showing us what type of partition we're looking at. It does tell us there's another disk, even though it isn't really a disk. It's a part of our disk, which is dev ZRAM 0, and it's put aside 1.92 gigabytes. And I presume that is memory, not actual disk like it used to be with basic swap. Okay, well let's see first, so we don't have to press that over and over. Let's try using parted. There's probably a command that I'll need to do. Print. It's been a while since I've used this as well. Okay, there we go. And I think I'm going to zoom this up just a little bit more. So again, showing us the partition types we have and giving us start and end and total size in megabytes in the case of the first partition. And so when we were doing the installation, we did see an ext4 creation of a partition go by, and that was the boot partition. And then second was the BTRFS partition, which was created, which is 84.8 gigs. Keeping in mind, of course, that we're never going to get that high. Other tools that we can use to look. We can use gparted, and it is not installed, so we'll go ahead and install it. And we'll launch it. Did I actually type it right? I can't believe it. So if you don't like using the command line, you can use gparted, which is basically a GUI skin on parted. So same thing we were seeing on parted, the command line application. So we have dev SDA2, which has 79 gigabytes, and we have dev SDA1, which is ext4 and is /boot. So you can click on each partition and it'll highlight it and give you Well, it looks like the same information essentially. So we have 72.58 gigabytes unused, and it is mounted on /home. And once again, we can see that it's BTRFS. One thing I did want to point out, if you do an upgrade and you're on ext4, so you go from Fedora 32 to Fedora 33, it will not upgrade your file system to BTRFS. You either have to do a clean install, or you can use a command line tool that will do the conversion for you. Cross your fingers. So my personal recommendation and what I've seen from the reading I've been doing, you're probably better off doing a clean install. And I know most people don't like to hear about that because it is quite a pain. And I think that's what I'm going to do to my desktop, because I've been having some other problems with my desktop, actually only one. And that is running Proton on Steam, well, not SteamOS, on Steam for games that are Windows games. And I have done it here on my laptop. My laptop has an NVIDIA chip, and my desktop has an RX 580 Radeon from AMD. So I kind of want to know if it's going to work. I feel like maybe, you know, the years that I've upgraded my OS over and over and over on my desktop might be the reason that Proton's not working. I had a couple of ideas. One was just use an external drive and do a quick install and see what happens. The other is, well, I could just wipe my drive and start fresh after I do a backup. Of course. Okay, so let's quit parted, clear, and find a file to edit here. vi bash .bash rc. So vi is actually installed. It's not like it's not going to be there. That's a good thing. I really didn't think they would take vi away, so I'm going to go ahead and quit. All right. Okay, so we've quit out of vi. Now let's do nano. Okay, hopefully you can see the difference. I'm going to try, and this is something I'm really used to, JKL, semicolon, ASDF. J would move us down. J does not move us down in the nano editor. So you have to use the arrow keys. Not a problem. I do like the colors. So we have comments here where the pound sign is, and it shows us specific colors for that. If and phi, which means and essentially. Now how do I get out? Control X. No, we don't want to save all that nonsense that I did. Okay. That's enough command line stuff. No. Oh, I see. I was thinking this was minimize. So we don't have minimize. We have close. Some different things we can do, which we've done. Can we right click? Yes. I always put all the buttons on the right back up. It's just something I'm used to. I've been used to it forever and a day. So that's what I use. Anyway, let's check activities. Look at all the applications that are installed by default. This is a very clean looking GNOME installation. I actually like this quite a bit. Boxes, calendar, cheese, clocks, contacts, files. Pretty much the basics. You have LibreOffice, Firefox. You do have maps. I'm not sure I remember seeing that before. I'm sure it's there. I've just never used it. Photos, Rhythmbox, which I personally prefer, even though it can be kind of problematic. Software, text editor. What happens when we click it? We get the graphical text editor. That makes perfect sense. Video player, our utilities. I wish it would tell us everything. Oh yeah, system monitor. Resources. One lonely CPU. Let's see what else we have. Videos and Gparted, which we just installed. Does the weather actually work? 55 degrees, clear sky. Nice. Tomorrow 73, Tuesday 65, Wednesday 60. That's some good weather coming up. Although I understand tomorrow it's supposed to rain, but I guess we'll find out. Anyway, let me close that. So those are the basic applications. What I did want to see is display settings. Nightlight. Yeah, neither of these are what I want to see. What I really want to see, and I'm not a GNOME user, so try not to laugh as I make huge mistakes. There's change background right there in front of my face, and I completely missed it. What can I say? Okay, currently this is the background picture. There's quite a lot of photos, but so we have different colors. I'm not sure I really get it. I guess what I'm wondering is, supposedly these will change as the day goes by. Anybody know anything about that? It's kind of a strange picture. I'm not really too fond of it, to be honest. Nighttime, I guess. Daytime. Well, it's not even 9 o'clock yet, so maybe it simply hasn't changed. I'm just not that good with GNOME. What else do we have? Pretty much everything we've looked at. Photos. No, photos fine. Photos from your online accounts. I am curious what online accounts. Google, Nextcloud, Facebook, Microsoft. Flickr, Foursquare, Microsoft Exchange, and Fedora, but I don't see one for iCloud. And that doesn't surprise me. But you can use Microsoft, so that's interesting. Or Google. Or if you want to live dangerously, Facebook. Alright, we'll close this app out. We haven't launched the browser. I mean, I'm hoping the browser works. I didn't launch it because I really think it's going to be perfectly fine. All right, start browsing. Very interesting. This menu bar normally doesn't appear, and yet this time it's on by default, which is fine. I actually kind of like it because you can have really important, often used links that something you want to have, and this one is already saved for us as a favorite. Free content: Wikipedia, LibriVox, OpenClipArt, free sound. I'm just not used to seeing that. Usually it's simply the URL address. Looks like everything's working well. Hi there, what can I help you with today? Free software. Free Red Hat. Alright, I'm going to close my tabs. Clean, austere desktop as usual. But we can see which apps we have open. Let me hit escape. I'm wondering. Nope. So you start everything by hitting activities. And we have two virtual desktops, one which is showing our command line, the other pretty much nothing. So let's launch Firefox on here and then go back to activities. I find it interesting that you don't see the command line on the first virtual desktop, but you do see the browser on the second one. So let's make this a little smaller. We'll resize it. Go to activities. We still see it, but we don't see the command line. It looks like a new virtual desktop was automatically created, which I believe was a thing with Fedora for some time now. I should say GNOME. My apologies. Files. This is not pretty. I don't like the icon set. I always change the icon set when I'm using GNOME. I prefer a dark background, so that's another thing that I change. I don't like how it's set up. Yay. Let's see what we can get. Prefer it like that, but not quite. Such a large space between columns. I don't remember how I fixed that. Whoops. We don't want to do that. And we did. Let's do Control Z, see if we can undo it. We can. Anyway. Other locations. What other locations would we have? Windows Network. I don't think there's anything on my Windows Network that's a Windows machine right now. Does that make any sense? No Windows PCs running in this house. And we have a lot of computers. No music yet. All right, well, I think we've covered the basics. If you do have questions about Fedora 33, and I hope I can answer them, I may not be able to, drop me a comment, let me know what you think. If you have any comments that you can give me about other features that I've skipped over with GNOME or under the hood that I need to do a little research on and maybe do a follow-up video, let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this quick look at Fedora 33. If you did, like and subscribe. I'll see you next time on Fast Gadgets. All right, the best is always at the end. I went to shut down my Fedora 33 virtual machine, and it literally is installing updates. See if I can get the mouse back. And it tells me, do not turn off your computer. I'm sure this is something I could disable, but I shouldn't have to disable something like this. Remember what we were talking about Linux in general and the distros following in the footsteps of Microsoft Windows and Mac OS? This is completely ugly. This is disgusting. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that it's beta and they want you to have the latest updates every time you run the beta. I'm hoping that's all it is. Maybe I overreacted. Thanks for watching. This video was made possible with support from viewers like you. If you find this video useful, consider becoming a patron for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/fastgadgets.